Greetings and love to all of you. Sam had a good job and a beautiful home until one day he heard this voice in his head saying, "Quit your job." And he thought, but I like my job. But this voice in his head was insistent, quit your job. So finally he quit his job. But then he heard this voice in his head say, sell your home and put all the money in the bank. And after a while, he obeyed the voice again, moved into a small apartment, and then he heard the voice say, take all your money out of the bank and catch a plane to Las Vegas. Well, he'd gone along this far, so when he was getting off the plane in Vegas, he heard the voice, which is coming through loud and clear now, say, go to Caesar's Palace. As he walked in the door, he heard the voice again say, go to the first roulette table. Got to the roulette table, and Sam heard the voice say, put everything on black 33. So Sam put everything out on black 33. There was a spin of the wheel, and it came to rest on red 7. And Sam heard the voice say, darn. Our topic this evening is intuition and trust in God. Intuition and trust in God, guiding lights in a chaotic world. And I'd like to talk mainly about intuition, because intuition is that voice of God within us, and as we begin to experience God through intuition, then we will definitely trust Him. Master Paramahansa Yogananda said, God's voice is silence. Only when thoughts cease can one hear the voice of God communicating through the silence of intuition. That is God's means of expression. In your silence, God's silence ceases. He speaks to you through your intuition. There's an interesting relationship between the soul and the ego that will help us to understand intuition. And this soul and ego are two senses of I-ness that we have within us. And of the soul, Master said, the soul is only a witness. It does not engage itself in the operations of the human intelligence, mind, and senses. It is an observer of the workings of cosmic nature in the body. That's the soul. It's only a witness, an observer. Regarding the ego, Master said, ego is when the soul, the image of God in man, forgets its true divine self and becomes identified with the powers of perception and action in the instruments of the body and mind. The Master goes on to say that the ego is the conscious nucleus of I-ness around which all human thoughts, feelings, and experience revolve. So the ego is this sense of I-ness having to do with this creation. But the real I is that pure knowing of existence, the soul. Master said, anything you can subtract from your consciousness without losing your sense of I-ness, you are not that. It's interesting, isn't it? Anything you can subtract from your consciousness without losing your sense of I-ness, you are not that. You must peel off these titles from the soul. I think, but I am not the thought. I feel, but I'm not the feeling. I will, but I'm not the will. What is left? The you that knows you exist, the you that feels you exist, through the proof given by intuition, the soul's unconditioned knowing of its own existence. So these are the two senses of I-ness that we have within us, that ego that relates to this world, and in the sense of I-ness, that pure knowing of our absolute existence, the soul. But getting back to intuition, what is intuition? The soul is individualized universal consciousness. It's individualized Christ or Kutastha consciousness. But how does this power of the soul help and benefit us? One of the qualities of the universal consciousness is omniscience. And the soul also has that quality of omniscience. But again, how is that omniscience going to help us? When we're in ego consciousness, and that's a quality of the soul, there has to be some link. And this is the key to understanding intuition. Intuition is that link between the omniscience of the soul and the ego. This is how Master expresses it. Intuition is the bridge between the soul and the ego's thoughts and sensations. Intuition is the bridge between the soul and the ego's thoughts and sensations. So intuition is that bridge, linking that omniscience of the soul with our ego consciousness. And Master also said, intuition is like a light, a flame of knowledge that comes from the soul. It possesses all-sighted power to know all there is to be known. And this flame of knowledge, it works in things big and small, spiritual and mundane, because it is just pure knowing. My first Kriya ceremony was in Miami back in 1971. And you have to remember, that was during the hippie era. So when I showed up for the Kriya ceremony, I wasn't really dressed in suit and tie. It was a little more casual. But as I was going in, I noticed this usher, and he had on this light tan suit. And I thought, he really looks dapper. If I ever had to wear a suit, I'd want one like that. Well, I never thought of it again because I didn't ever think I would wear a suit. But months later, I moved to Hollywood and started attending Hollywood Temple. And after a while, I thought, well, I should really get a suit to wear to temple services. But not having any money, I went to an elderly devotee that was there at that time, a Miss Carter. And she was responsible for receiving and distributing used clothing and other items. It was part of our voluntary league program. And Miss Carter prided herself on her intuition. And she was always sending little things to Brother Bhaktananda, whether it was socks or a folder for his papers, and saying, I just thought you may need this. Well, the interesting thing was, Brother would often confirm she was right. So when I told Miss Carter I needed a suit, she said, I think I have just the right suit for you. And she walked over to a couple of racks of suits, and she pulled out a suit that was exactly like that suit that the usher in Miami had been wearing. As a young devotee on the path, I was really impressed with Ms. Carter's intuition. I had forgotten all about the suit, but Divine Mother hadn't forgotten. It was almost like she was saying, well, if he's willing to wear a suit, I'll give him one he likes. Recently, I was talking with a devotee I've counseled with for a number of years. And she said, Brother, last night I woke up in the middle of the night, and as I was laying there, I just looked in the spiritual eye, and it was the most beautiful, brilliant light I've ever seen. She said, not just in the spiritual eye, but through my whole head. What has Ms. Carter's being able to pick out just the right suit and this devotee seeing the light of God got in common? They're both intuitional experiences. Again, that intuition doesn't think in terms, it doesn't think, it's just knowing. So it's not judging, well, this is important, this is not important. It works in all areas. We all have this bridge of intuition within us. We all have hunches, intuitive feelings. But for most of us, that intuition seems very vague and unpredictable. It's kind of like inspiration or understanding that kind of just like clouds kind of floats in and out of the consciousness. But Master said that link, that consciousness connecting the soul and the ego can be developed. He says that the intuition can be developed. However, with all that we have to do, why would we want to make a priority of cultivating intuition? Well, again, let me read something Master says about intuition. Every man inherently possesses something of this power, but in most, it is undeveloped. This undeveloped intuition is a crystal placed before the soul, producing a double image. The soul itself is the real image. The reflection is unreal, the ego, or pseudo-soul. The more undeveloped the intuition is, the more distorted the ego image will be. When human life is guided by this false identity, which is brought about by the presence of undeveloped intuition, it is subject to all the limitations and false notions of delusion. A chaotic existence of error and its consequences is therefore inevitable. Guided by the ego of undeveloped intuition, a chaotic existence of error and its consequences is inevitable. But if we have developed intuition, on the other hand, we make better choices. We suffer less. We're happier. There's a harmony in our lives. We realize this harmony within our lives even when the outer circumstances are chaotic. But another reason for developing this intuition is because all spiritual experiences are intuitional experiences. In his autobiography, when Master describes his experience in cosmic consciousness, he said, I cognize the center of the empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my heart. The experience of cosmic consciousness, it's an intuitive perception. So again, intuition works in those things, both great and small, both spiritual and mundane. Intuition is truth, and this is why it's so important in our life. Being truth, it can work across the whole spectrum of our life. And how do we cultivate intuition? Well, there's different things we can do, like following through on our hunches. But, don't quit your job and sell the house just yet. There are techniques. Master talks about concentrating simultaneously on the heart center and the Christ center. So there are techniques. But however we're trying to cultivate intuition, intuition is dependent on one quality. And that's why this evening, instead of talking about trying this technique and trying to do this and that, I'd like to talk about this one quality that intuition is dependent on. And that one quality is calmness. Master said, calmness is one of the greatest gifts of God. It is the eye of spirit, the pure intuitive perception of the soul. And our beloved Ma said, as you live more in a state of calmness, you begin to perceive yourself less as a physical being. You become aware of an inner stillness coming from the soul, the real you. That stillness is the foundation of the intuitive sense. What is the immediate goal of meditation? Stillness. Why are we practicing meditation techniques? To get into that stillness so we can experience the divine through intuitive perception. And Master said the only way one can permanently establish himself in the inner evenness of yoga is by meditation. Notice he says permanently establish oneself in that state. So it's not experiencing it just in meditation, but trying to carry that calmness over into our activities as well. But there has to be that contact with that deep stillness in meditation, then trying to take it into our activity. Master stresses that again and again. Carry the calm after effects with you. Carry the calm after effects of meditation with you. Getting to a point of deep stillness in meditation is probably challenge enough for most of us, but trying to take that stillness when we leave meditation, it raises the bar even more. When we do experience that deep calmness, that deep stillness in meditation, we're becoming aware of the soul. That is that pure perceiving consciousness. We're just aware of awareness. Remember, Guruji said that the soul is only a witness? The soul is only a witness. Why is it then that when we leave meditation, we can't just witness what is going on around us the same way that we were able to just witness in that stillness of meditation? Because Guruji refers to the soul as just a witness, an observer, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we can call witnessing consciousness. And that is being that silent observer of what's going on both inwardly and outwardly. Master said, just as a person can watch through a screen a crowd of people in front of him without himself being seen by them, so the soul, through the screen of intuition, watches all its thoughts. When we're meditating and we're having difficulty with the thoughts not wanting to settle down, who is aware of those thoughts? We're not the thoughts, but we're aware of them. The soul, the real self. Let's do a visualization. Close your eyes. Let us all do this together. Close your eyes. Imagine that you're floating in a huge tank of crystal clear water, about 60 feet down. You're a yogi, so you don't need to breathe. The water's a perfect temperature. You hardly know where the body ends and the water begins. It's so quiet. It's so calm. You're just aware of that clear water. A little fish swims by. You're hardly aware of it because you're focused on that beautiful pure water. Another fish swims by. It doesn't matter. You're just enjoying being in that water. Now another little fish is swimming by, and this time you think, he has unusual orange stripes. An interesting thing happens. When you think this, the fish stops as if energy from your thoughts halted him directly in front of you. As you look at the side of the fish, you think, his scales have a beautiful iridescence. As you think this, another interesting thing happens. The fish is drawn closer to you, so you see more details on the side of the fish. Then you think, his fins look like a silky fabric floating in the water. As you think this, the side of the fish is drawn even closer. With each thought, the side of the fish is drawn closer, and you see more and more detail of the fish. Now it's so close, all you see is the side of the fish. You're no longer aware of the beautiful clear water you're surrounded by. You realize that by the power of your attention, you have drawn this fish within 2 inches of your face. So you release the fish by shifting your attention back to the crystal clear water and the fish swims away. It's so nice. No more fish. Just awareness of the water and the sensation of the body losing its boundaries and blending with the water. You don't know how big the tank is, but it just seems to go on forever. There's just the joy of the sensation of dissolving, merging with a beautiful, crystal clear water. You can open your eyes now, but that beautiful, crystal clear water is that divine consciousness. And the fish are our thoughts. We can let those thoughts swim through, or we can focus on them and hold them with the power of our attention. When we do that, the more attention we put on those thoughts, the less we're aware of that pure perceiving consciousness. And the problem is, with most of us, we've become focused on so many thoughts that there's not even a gap in those thoughts to give us a glimpse of that peace, of that beautiful, crystal clear consciousness of the soul. We think that our thoughts are so important, and some of them are. I mean, we have responsibilities, we have our interest, we certainly want to think about the Guru's teachings, but how many of our thoughts are really that important? How many of our thoughts are really going to benefit us? In some areas, fishermen are required to catch and release. And that's exactly what we should be doing with those thoughts that are not needed. We should be releasing them, letting them go. When we don't need to be thinking, do we use that opportunity to let the consciousness just rest back into that stillness? Or does the mind keep up its incessant mental chatter? Well, during the pause, did your mind just drop back into that stillness? Or did the mind just continue, well, why didn't he say something? You know? I mean, he's wasting time. But when we have the opportunity, when we don't need to be thinking, use those pauses to, again, let that consciousness drop back within, feel that peace. Let it become immersed in that soul consciousness. Just feel that peace within when we're not needing to think. One author compared the incessant mental chatter as to having a neurotic roommate that you can't get rid of. It's a good analogy, isn't it? The mind is really our instrument that we can use, but it seems like it should have come equipped with a pause button. Well, the good news is it did. Our beloved Ma, over the years, has told us so many times about how when Master was giving her many responsibilities having to do with the organization, and she would come to him with so many difficulties, and before she could even voice them, Master would say, just keep your mind here, just keep your mind here, pointing to the Katastha or the spiritual eye. And when Ma would share that, she would say, you may think he wasn't giving me anything, but he was. Someone once asked Ma, how do we learn to keep the attention at the Kutastha even during the activity of the day? She replied, only one way, through practice. She went on to say, when you're carrying on your duties, your attention should be on what you're doing. That is vital. But every now and then, throughout the day, it is possible to stop for a moment, whatever you're doing, anywhere, and just let the mind rest at the Kutastha. Truthfully, it becomes automatic after a while. When I'm busy with many things in connection with Guruji's work, every now and then I'll pause and turn my mind within. In an instant, that throbbing presence of the divine is there, that joyous, loving presence of God. This you will find also if you cultivate the habit. As time goes on, you will find that more and more your mind rests at that point, no matter what you're doing. Your consciousness becomes spiritualized. The consciousness does become spiritualized as we practice that. Because remember, we said we have two senses of I-ness, the ego and the soul. And the more we let the attention rest at that point, the more we're identifying with that calmness and that peace of the soul, and less with the restless ego. So it's up to us. What do we really want to identify with? The peaceful soul or that restless ego? That pause button, it doesn't work for most of us because of lack of use. But as Ma says, if you practice, it becomes more automatic. Master said, to retain your spiritual consciousness, keep your awareness always at the point between the eyebrows. Feel the superconsciousness of the soul. The meditating yogi's eyes are uplifted and his breath is more or less still. And even when active in the outer world, his mind dwells in superconsciousness, focused always at the Christ Kutastha center between the eyebrows. And this is something that Gurudeva taught throughout his life. In India, he said, fix your attention on the Kutastha and always dwell in Chittakasha, meaning the inner realm of consciousness. Fix your attention on the Kutastha and always dwell in that inner realm of consciousness. As a young monk, I was given an assignment of cleaning one of the porches on the administration building at Mother Center. And in order to get to the porch, I had to go by Ma's office. In that regard, it was a very nice assignment because occasionally I would see Ma. And one day as I was going to clean the porch, I saw that Ma was getting up, looked like getting ready to leave her office. And I thought, well, I'll just stop by and say hello to Ma and have darshan. And as I got to the door, Ma was getting ready to leave, and she was walking by her desk, and she had picked up something and was reading it. And as I stepped over the threshold and I saw her standing there reading that, there was just such an aura of peace about her. I couldn't say anything. I felt like I was intruding or I would disturb this peace. So Ma's standing there reading, and I'm just standing there in the doorway. And finally, she just calmly looked up and she said, "Hello, Robert." And of course, I was completely tongue-tied. And I was saying, well, I just wanted to say hello, Ma. And understandingly, she was very sweet and talked to me for a few minutes to, I think, to try and just put me at ease. But I never forgot that experience, because when Ma looked up from what she was reading, it was like she was emerging from some deep sea of peace. And when she did, that wave of that peace just came over me. And I never forgot it, because I thought that's the way the saints live. They live with a large portion of that consciousness just immersed in that soul consciousness. Someone used the illustration of an iceberg, where 90% of the iceberg is beneath the water, 10% is above the water. And they use this to illustrate the consciousness of the saint, how a large portion of that consciousness stays within, immersed in that perception of the soul. And then there's still plenty of consciousness to deal with this outer world. But I know some of us may think, well, 90% within and 10% without. How about 50-50? You know? The reason we think that way is we think if we keep a large portion of our consciousness within, we're going to miss something in this world. It's not so. As I said, we can keep a large portion of our consciousness within and still be aware of everything we need to be aware of in this world. In fact, we'll be able to much more fully participate in this world because we won't be lost somewhere in the maze of our own thoughts. We'll be present. Ma once said, the Gita teaches even-mindedness, to accept all circumstances with a divinely imperturbable attitude. If I have crosses to bear today, all right, I'll do my best to overcome them. If good things come to me today, all right, I'll enjoy them. Neither will make me forget God. Whatever comes each day, I am not dismayed, I am not overexcited. I am resting always in the eternal peace, the eternal love beyond this finite world. Sounds like a beautiful way to live, doesn't it? And this is a good description of Ma. She has that divine consciousness there, but I've never known of anyone that I would think could participate in life more than Ma. She lives life to the fullest. I had the privilege of another assignment. For over 20 years, I was one of the monks that did the gardening at one of the retreats. And there was a little office in the back of the retreat where Ma would often work. And one of the duties the monks had was to fill the hummingbird feeder. And the little hummingbird feeder was there at the entrance to the office. And every time Ma would see those little creatures buzzing around that feeder, there was such joy, there was such enthusiasm in watching them. I remember once there was a number of them hovering around the feeder, and there was one that was kind of the bully, and he was trying to run the others off. And Ma, she just laughed and she shook her head and said, "Look, they're just like people. They don't understand there's enough for everybody." I was there regularly for over 20 years, and I never saw that fascination with those little creatures diminish. She always found that joy as if it was the first time she was seeing them. And also you could see Ma when she heard about some tragedy. You could see how pained she was, how deeply she cared for others. And again, this is because the consciousness is anchored in God. There's that freedom of the consciousness then to participate fully in life. Most of us are too selfishly locked up in our own little minds with our neurotic roommate to really enjoy and fully participate in life. We're in there somewhere. We're not able to empathize with somebody that's going through something difficult. We're not even able to empathize and enjoy their joy without any sense of envy or jealousy. But when we're anchored within, we're secure in that absolute knowing of our existence, then the consciousness is free to experience what others experience. And not only what others are experiencing, it gives us an appreciation for everything when it's perceived with that pure perceiving consciousness. In Zen, this purity of consciousness, this pure perception is called no mind, meaning no ruffles, no thought, just that pure perception. And one Zen master said, "To a student of Zen, even a weed is a treasure." Even a weed is a treasure, because he's seeing with that pure consciousness, seeing essence of that weed, seeing the harmony, the intelligence creating that weed, seeing the divine there. It reminds me so much of Master's quote, Fully enjoy the wonder and beauty of each instant. Fully enjoy the wonder and beauty of each instant. Like I say, for most of us, we're not present where we are. We're in our thoughts somewhere else. Remember the old saying, be here now, be somewhere else later. You know? Be here now. If you're going to be somewhere else later, wait and be there then. But be present where you are. Enjoy that wonder and beauty of each instant. But what is it that prevents us from just allowing those thoughts to swim through? What is it that prevents us from allowing all the experiences of life to just pass through us, to enjoy, to be able to experience those things just passing through us? Remember how the fish got closer and closer and we could see more detail of the fish? Once you could see some of the detail of the fish, what if you would have thought, he looks just like Eddie, the little fish I had in my aquarium when I was in junior high school. I used to lay there awake at night with just the aquarium light on and watch Eddie swim around. I was so sad when Eddie died. It was like losing a friend. And then you begin to think about the other pets you've lost and how sad you were. Before long, it's not just the thoughts that's preventing you from perceiving that pure consciousness. It's also the disturbance of the emotions. And when the emotions get involved, it's very difficult to release those thoughts. The emotions add tremendous energy there. So being able to release those thoughts, we have to be careful that we're not creating these strong emotions. Some of us have strong emotions about everything. This makes me so happy. This makes me so sad. I love this. I hate that. I mean, it's just... You know, if we only knew the price we paid for those strong emotions. And Master tells us what the price is, and it's a pretty high one. Let me read you what he said. Man's egotistic feelings expressing as likes and dislikes are entirely responsible for the bondage of the soul to the body and earthly environment. Let me read it for you again. Man's egotistic feelings expressing as likes and dislikes are entirely responsible for the bondage of the soul to the body and earthly environment. It's the feeling that passes judgment on our thoughts and our experiences. It's the feeling that decides whether we like this or not. The thing is, when we cling to certain thoughts or sensations because we like them, and then we push other thoughts and sensations away because we don't like them, the same thing is happening. We're focusing on them, we're giving energy to them, we're holding them. We may think it's not that way, but you watch it. When you're pushing it away, you're still focusing on it. That's why in your meditation sometime watch. You'll have thoughts and you think, well, I shouldn't be thinking that kind of thought in meditation. That really makes me feel guilty. I wonder if Master really loves me if I think thoughts, you don't want that thought. But it's got you, So it doesn't matter whether we're liking it or disliking it. We're putting that energy on it. Best to be neutral and just let it pass through. When we get overly emotionally involved, right away that sacrifices our intuitive perception. Intuition cannot exist with the emotional disturbances. It's just incompatible because intuition requires calmness. And the emotional disturbance creates these upheavals in the consciousness. We've been talking about how vitally important this calmness is for both our activity and our meditations. But even that calmness is not sufficient. Brother Bhaktananda was an ideal example of calmness. Brother Bhaktananda was Mr. Calmness. It was like one of the monks said of him one time, a bomb could go off in the next room and Brother may say, "Oh my." And that's about, I was around Brother for many years, and that was about the extent of any upheaval in Brother's consciousness I ever saw. That was his greatest exclamation. Oh my. He had been anchored in that stillness, in that calmness for many, many years. And Brother stressed the stillness of meditation. He stressed to us to make stillness a part of every meditation. But as much as Brother stressed stillness and calmness, he said stillness is not enough. He said stillness is not enough. There has to be love. Stillness is not enough. There has to be love. If there's no love, if there's no devotion, if there's no desire for God, that calmness, that stillness will be sterile. There won't be that personal, sweet, loving presence of the divine there. Some of us may think, but I'm not the devotional type. Is devotion really necessary? Well, we can cultivate intuition to a degree without having devotion, just by being calm. But we cannot have that deep God communion without devotion. We'll never have that deep God communion, that intuitive experience then, without devotion. Master said, without devotion, no sadhana can take you to God. Without devotion, no sadhana can take you to God. He also said, only love makes you one with God. Only love makes you one with God. How deep is our love for God? Our desire for God? How much do we desire to be away from this world and to be with God? There's a story of a king in ancient India. His name was Padma, and he had a wonderful queen by the name of Leela. And Padma was a great devotee of Saraswati. And every morning, Padma would start his day by going and worshiping Saraswati and meditating before her image. And sometimes he would just be lost in his devotions to Saraswati. And there was a king in a neighboring kingdom that wanted to take over part of Padma's territory. And so there was to be a great battle. And the battle was to be held on a field in front of Padma's castle. So on the day of the battle, Padma went to his puja room as usual and performed his worship of Saraswati and meditated before her image. Then he put on his armor and he led his army out onto the battlefield. And the queen, Leela, she went up on the wall of the castle overlooking the battlefield. And when she got up there, she was pleasantly surprised that Saraswati materialized beside her. And this was very reassuring for her. And the battle began, and of course Leela's eyes were fixed on her husband Padma. And during the battle, Padma's chariot overturned, and he was thrown out onto the battlefield. And as he stood up, the other king's chariot came roaring by, and the king decapitated Padma. And Leela was horrified. And she turned to Saraswati and she says, "How could you let that happen? He was your devotee." And Saraswati said, "So is the other king. The other king asked to win the battle. Your husband did not." And when I read that, I thought, oh, Padma was lost in his devotions and he didn't even ask to win the battle. But what Saraswati said was, she said, "The other king asked to win the battle. Your husband did not. He asked for liberation." So, do we want to expand our kingdom in this chaotic world, or do we want God? Do we want to have that intuitive perception of God in the stillness of our souls? Or do we want to continually experience the bedlam on the battlefield of His creation? That's the choice we have. We all want God, otherwise we wouldn't be here this evening. But do we really believe that we can experience God? Or is that something that is really more for the saints and the masters? Are we going to have to content ourselves with just being a good person and going to services and feeling a little peace in meditation? All that's fine. But we have to be careful that we don't get to the point where we think that's all there is for us. At Hollywood Temple, we have 2 services on Sunday morning. And recently, during a service, I talked quite a bit about Ma and other direct disciples of Master. And after the service, one of the ushers came up to me and he said, "Brother, it's inspiring when you talk about Ma and Brother Bhaktananda and those disciples, but does anybody experience God now? I mean, what about us common folks?" And I said, absolutely, people experience God now. Master's alive and well. He's active in his devotees' life. His teachings work. So I went back in for the second service. And during the second service, I talked not only about Ma and those other great disciples that came with Master to help establish this blessed work, but I also talked about the common folks that I've known over the years. And I talked about a lady that recently came to me and she was talking about her meditation practices. And she said that she had been reading something of Master's and she thought, I should incorporate that in my meditations. And she did. And she said, after some time, there was such bliss. And she said, I have to remind myself of what Sri Yukteswar told Master. You must not get overdrunk with ecstasy. And another devotee who I've known for many years, a few years ago, he told me that he was going breathless in meditation. And I asked him how long he was breathless. And he said, well, I don't know because I'm meditating. But he said, judging from the amount of time I'm in meditation and the amount of time it takes to do the techniques, he said, it's probably 20 minutes to a half an hour. I said, well, what are you experiencing while you're breathless? And he said, brother, I don't know where you draw the line between joy and bliss, but whatever it is, I can't imagine there's anything else. Sometime later, I was talking to him and I asked him if there was a sense of expansion in that feeling of bliss. And he said, I'll have to think about that. And he emailed me recently and he said, when you ask if there was a sense of expansion with the bliss, he said, that's a very good description of what I'm experiencing. He said, but I don't like to think about it because the ego likes to analyze and get involved with it. And I want to just enjoy it. But I don't tell these stories to discourage anyone. I tell them to encourage us that Master's teachings work, that there are us common folks that are experiencing God. I'd like to share one other devotee's story, and it has to do more with the witnessing consciousness that we were talking about. And this devotee's been on the path for probably about 15 years, and probably mid to late 40s, I would guess. Very nice man, and kind of an outgoing personality, good sense of humor, has a lot of responsibility in his job, very serious about his sadhana. And I had an email from him toward the end of last year. I'd like to read part of his email because he started out and he was talking about his new job and his new location. And then he said, however, the real change this year has been an inner one. Over the last 2 years, I experienced for a few hours outside of meditation, then a day, a very heightened state of awareness. There was no thought at all, only awareness of the now. Peaceful, complete feeling of being one with all things best describe it. While visiting friends earlier this year, it happened again, this time lasting all weekend. It was very intense, and the more so due to the fact that I was with people this time and could actually talk and interact and still be in this space. Barring from Zen, I usually refer to it as no mind, as this seems to best convey the state. I was talking to him on the phone after I received his email, and he explained to me what happened while he was visiting with friends that weekend. They had a little group meditation, and during the meditation, he said he felt this tremendous jolt of energy at the top of the head. And he said it wasn't painful, he said, but it was very distinct. And after that, the meditation was just very deep, very still. And then he got up and started into the room where his friends were, and he realized he was still in that deep state of peace. But going back to his email, he said, after moving here around July, it happened again. Only this time, it was so gradual, I didn't even notice it at first. The amazing thing was, it never left. You know the deep stillness we have during meditation when there's no thought at all, only a silent witnessing of being? That's how I live now, and the only variation seems to be in the depth of it. Master makes the analogy of normal waking consciousness being like the waves on the ocean. And it's like that. There are times when I'm only a few feet below, a few thoughts arise. Most of the time, I'm about 60 feet down with almost no thought. And there are times where it's like being at the bottom of the ocean, so still, all there is pure awareness. There have been times, even at work, surrounded by intense activity and people, that I am completely still, totally in the world, not of it. Just the silent witness. Very strange. Additionally, I am usually deep almost immediately when meditating because I'm essentially in that state all day. He did say when we were talking that the one thing that would take him considerably deeper during his meditation was his practice of Kriya. He said, when conversing, I used to think about what I was going to say. Now there's just internal silence. Then after a small gap, when the other person is done speaking, words happen. In addition, I rely on intuition much more now and mind-based logic much less. Not surprisingly, the results are much better. In that deep state of calmness, the intuition is much more active. He said, I can obviously still think, but I turn it off and on when needed and do not have the incessant internal chatter running all day and night. This blessed stillness is so wonderful compared to the normal waking consciousness, monkey mind, that I pray daily I never lose it. 6 months now, but who's counting? So here's one of us common folks. And that intuition is becoming more of a constant guiding light in his life instead of there being just an occasional flicker. Again, because there is that deep calmness. And through that awakening intuition, he's having the experience of God in deep meditation. He's experiencing God as light. He's experiencing God as this tremendous joy. He said sometimes when the love comes, he said, I just cannot contain the tears. Tremendous love and joy. Intuitive experiences. And it can be the same for all of us. You know, we didn't receive a less portion of divine consciousness than anybody else. Our soul is no different from that of the saints. Our soul consciousness is right there. Our soul consciousness is right there behind our thoughts and our emotions. But we need to develop that bridge of intuition to carry us across. Master tells us that divine consciousness is closer than hands and feet, closer than breath and heartbeat. It's what we really are. It's our absolute existence. Reaching and remaining in this state of deep inner stillness in meditation and activity, it's a very lofty goal. It's not easy. But the thing is, it's just like all aspects of the spiritual life. When we make an intent, when we make a strong determination, when we begin to make an effort, then Master's help is there. Master's help is there. It's just like the woman who discovered something in Master's teachings and thought she should be practicing that in her meditations. Master can guide us. It's not through voices like Sam had, but through that pure intuition, through that silent whispers from the soul. Master lets us know this is the right thing to do. This is the way to go. This is what you should be practicing. And this to me is one of the most beautiful parts of the guru-disciple relationship, is the guru can guide us in very personal, very specific, very sweet ways, very unique to each soul, because each one of us has a different approach to the divine. And Master knows our souls. He knows how we're to get back to God. And He can guide us along our own essential bias, so to speak. But there has to be that calmness, that attunement with the Guru. And I was recently reading something that Ma said about attunement with Master. And she said, attunement comes when you fix your mind first and foremost upon your goal of God realization. Then you're in tune with the Guru, because this is his sole mission, to help you reach the divine goal. When we have that desire for God, that's what the Guru wants to see. Then he can help us. We have free will, and Master's not going to impose himself on us. But when we show Master what our greatest desire is, then his unceasing blessings are there, and we become receptive to those blessings. So the more we want God, the more we try and interiorize our consciousness, the more we try and keep a portion of that consciousness within to experience God, the more Master's help will be there. And as I mentioned, it can be so personal, so specific to us. Ma one time was talking about the different ways Master was training those disciples that he had drawn close around him. And then she said, remember that he speaks to you too, just as personally. He speaks to you too, just as personally, through his teachings and through the inner promptings of your conscience, so long as you cultivate with him a relationship of trust and love. So he speaks to us through his teachings and through our conscience. And it makes Master's job much easier if we know his teachings. He can guide us easier on that inner intuitional plane of consciousness if we know his teachings. It's like knowing his language so that he can speak to us. So as soon as we make that strong intent to live an interior life, Master's help is there. Master's help is there. Tomorrow, if someone asks you, were you at last night's class, you'll probably say, yeah, I was there. It was something about neurotic fish. But if you don't remember anything else, try to remember that if we want that light of God's intuition guiding our lives, then we have to get rid of those two obstacles, those two obstructions that obscure that light. And that is that incessant mental chatter and those strong emotions. If we get rid of those strong likes and dislikes, if we get rid of those restless thoughts, if we have a desire for God, then we will have not only that intuitive perception of what is the right thing to do, but we'll have the intuitive perception of God. This topic of intuition is so deep, and there's so many aspects of it that we couldn't even begin to cover it in a 1-hour class. But for those of you who may be interested, Ma has a wonderful little book entitled Intuition, Soul Guidance for Life's Decisions. And then look in the index of God Talks with Arjuna and the Second Coming of Christ. Look up intuition. There's a tremendous amount of information there. Use those two books as like spiritual reference manuals. Whenever you need something, look it up in God Talks with Arjuna and the Second Coming of Christ. Master has given us so much. So let us try and make the best of all of it. I'd like to close with these words of Gurudeva. God's voice is silence. Only when thoughts cease can one hear the voice of God communicating through the silence of intuition. That is God's means of expression. In your silence, God's silence ceases. He speaks to you through your intuition. In your silence, God's silence ceases. He speaks to you through your intuition. Jai Guru, Jai Ma.